And now back to the Trump presidency and the testimony today from former special counsel Rober Mueller on Capitol Hill. He spent the morning facing lawmakers' questions about his 448-page report.
Former Assistant U.S. Attorney David Weinstein joins us now. David, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Before we get your input into this, a big question today was obstruction of justice. And here's one of the exchanges between the members of Congress.
Was there sufficient evidence to convict President Trump or anyone else with obstruction of justice?
We did not make that calculation.
How could you not have made the calculation with the regulation?
The OLC opinion, Office of Legal Counsel, indicates that we cannot indict a sitting president.
All right, so he brought that up a lot, explained that it's not really a law, right? It's a policy?
It's a policy of the Department of Justice, and it's a policy for the good of the country. You don't want to have an indictment against a sitting president. That's the leader of our country. You can't have that person under the gun and under charges defending his or her innocence at a time when they're supposed to be leading our country. So the Department of Justice says you can't indict a sitting president.
So this could have very different outcomes when he is not president any longer, right? If he's reelected, the statute of limitations will come up and he won't be able to be indicted, presumably.
Unless they're claiming there's some sort of ongoing conspiracy that continues now as we sit here that would extend the statute of limitations until that conspiracy ended. But just on the obstruction charges themselves, no, the statute of limitations is going to run after 5 years, and if he's reelected, he can't be indicted as a sitting president. But it doesn't answer the question of whether or not there was obstruction. That's a totally different question.
David, from a legal standpoint, did this testimony today make any difference at all on whether or not Congress should or will pursue impeachment?
Two different questions, should and will. I think we know the answer to will. It doesn't seem that there's enough of a groundswell in Congress and enough of support, even amongst the Democrats, to bring forward impeachment proceedings. Should they? Well, that was a suggestion that Mueller made when he released his report. The questions that were asked today from the Democrats were very pointed about the attitudes that the president took, what he did, the actions he took. Did that constitute obstruction? They went through the 10 points. So there are some who are sitting there who believe that there should be an impeachment proceeding.
And a lot of members have said that the purpose of this was for the words to come out of his mouth, because a lot of Americans haven't read the entire report. Were you surprised by anything today?
Well, as they say, I don't think the movie was as good as the book. A lot of what he said today was in the report. A lot of the questions he answered, it was in the report, and he didn't have to just say, read the report. Many of the things they asked him, they were in the report, but most people didn't. So I think to the extent that they wanted him to give people a soundbite so that they could run with it, each side got a soundbite. They didn't get a knockdown soundbite, one that's going to be blasted all over the place. I think it was a little bit of a blasé performance by him.
Yeah, the only time I noticed that he got emotional was when he was defending the people that worked for him as to whether or not, how many of them are Democrats, how many of them are Republicans, how many contributed money, where he made it quite clear that he hired people not based on their political beliefs.
He's always been a general, or the person up at top, somebody that's leading the troops. And he took great offense, you're right, to that statement that you would surround yourself with people that were biased one way or another. He always selected people who were the most qualified to get the job done. He didn't look at who your affiliation was, what your background was. Can you get the job done, and are you going to get the job done? And as a leader, he's very defensive of his troops. He showed it when he was in the military, and he showed it here today. So that's what we got from him, and that's why I think the hair on his neck stood up when they were attacking the people who he put together. And even the suggestion that it was biased one way or another. He was doing his job. He was trying to be fair and impartial and making sure that justice was done.
Okay, David, thank you very much.
Nice to see you, David. Thank you.